The bitter Montana wind howled through Pinewood as Jack Thompson clutched the steering wheel, his 3 German shepherds panting in the back of his weathered pickup. That's when they all heard it, a child's scream piercing the air. Before Jack could react, his truck door flew open and 4 shapes bolted toward the sound. Duke, Max, Bella, and astonishingly, Luna, the gray tabby cat, running in perfect formation with the dogs. "Dear Lord," whispered Margaret Wilson, dropping her grocery bags on the sidewalk. "That cat thinks it's one of them." The crowd gathered at the edge of Carson Creek gasped as the small cat fearlessly plunged into the rushing water alongside the German shepherds, moving with the same determined purpose. Luna wasn't swimming like a cat desperately avoiding water. She was powering through the current with strong, deliberate strokes exactly like her canine siblings. No one in Pinewood had ever seen anything like it, but then again, no one knew the extraordinary journey that had brought this unlikely family together, nor the heartbreak and miracles that had shaped them into something greater than the sum of their parts. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching. From now, let's continue with the story. The small town of Pinewood, Montana, nestled against the foothills of the Rockies, was the kind of place where most folks knew each other's business, and change came slowly. If at all, it was here that Jack Thompson had settled with his wife Sarah 15 years ago. Drawn by the peaceful surroundings and the promise of a simpler life after his military service, their modest home sat at the edge of town along Carson Creek, a usually gentle stream that wound through the countryside. The white, clapboard house wasn't fancy, but Sarah had transformed it into a warm haven with her careful touches, handmade curtains, refinished antique furniture, and always fresh flowers when they were in season. Jack Thompson, at 62, though locals would guess him younger, thanks to his straight posture and quick step, had the weathered face of someone who'd spent years outdoors. His salt and pepper hair remained thick, and his light brown eyes, while often shadowed with grief these days, still held a spark of the humor Sarah had loved. His hands, calloused from decades of work, now moved methodically through daily tasks that seemed to have lost their purpose since her passing. Sarah had been gone just 3 months cancer, swift and merciless despite her determined fight. The town still brought casseroles and checked in on Jack, but the acute community attention was beginning to fade, leaving him alone with his grief and his 3 German shepherds, who seemed as lost without Sarah as he was. Duke, the oldest at 8 years, had been their first dog, a dignified, calm presence, with soulful brown eyes and the beginning of gray around his muzzle. Sarah had called him the old gentleman for his protective yet gentle nature. Max, 6 years old and full of boundless energy, had joined them 2 years later when Sarah insisted Duke needed a playmate, and Bella, the youngest at 4, had been Sarah's special project, the runt of her litter, requiring extra care and attention, now grown into a beautiful, intelligent companion. The dogs had been Sarah's joy, but her greatest wish had been to add a cat to their family, specifically a cat that could hold its own with 3 large German shepherds. "Every family needs balance," she'd said. "Dogs give unconditional love, but cats teach you to earn it." Jack had been skeptical, but he'd promised to consider it once she got better. It was a promise he'd never had the chance to keep. Margaret Wilson, their 65-year-old neighbor with her perfectly maintained garden and equally rigid opinions, had suggested the dogs might be too much for a widower to handle. Dr. Alan Parker, the town's 45-year-old veterinarian, had gently offered that he knew people looking for good dogs if Jack ever decided to simplify his life. Jack had thanked them both and firmly closed his door on their suggestions. The dogs were his last connection to Sarah. They stayed. The morning sun struggled to penetrate the heavy gray clouds hanging over Pinewood, much like the darkness that had settled over Jack Thompson's life since Sarah's passing 3 months ago. He sat at the kitchen table, coffee gone cold, staring at the framed photo of his wife. Her smile still brightened the room, even though she wasn't there to share it anymore. "She always wanted a cat," Jack mumbled to himself as Duke, the oldest of his 3 German shepherds, rested his head on Jack's knee. The dog's brown eyes seemed to understand the weight of loss that pressed down on his master's shoulders. "But we never got around to it, did we? Boy!" Jack scratched behind Duke's ears, remembering how Sarah would spend hours researching cat breeds that might get along with their beloved dogs. "A tabby," she'd say, eyes twinkling with hope. "They're adaptable and friendly, perfect for our rowdy bunch." But then came the diagnosis, and suddenly there was no time for new beginnings, only painful endings. Max and Bella padded into the kitchen, their nails clicking against the linoleum floor. They sensed Jack's melancholy, as they had every day since the funeral. The house felt emptier without Sarah's laughter echoing through the rooms, without her gentle commands to the dogs, without her presence that made their house a home. "Come on, fellas," Jack sighed, rising stiffly from his chair. "Time for your walk." The rain started just as they reached the edge of town. A light drizzle at first that quickly transformed into a torrential downpour. Jack turned back, his 62-year-old bones protesting against the dampness and cold. The dogs trotted obediently beside him, occasionally shaking water from their thick coats. That's when they heard it, a faint, desperate cry coming from beneath a pile of debris washed against the bridge supports. Jack would have missed it entirely if Duke hadn't stopped abruptly. Ears perked forward, body suddenly alert. "What is it, boy?" Jack asked. Peering through the curtain of rain, the cry came again. Weaker this time, Jack approached cautiously, moving aside broken branches and sodden cardboard. There, trembling and half-drowned, was a tiny gray tabby kitten with distinctive stripes, no more than a few weeks old. "Well, I'll be," Jack whispered, reaching for the shivering creature. To his surprise, Duke didn't growl or bark as he carefully extracted the kitten. Instead, the German shepherd moved closer, sniffing curiously. Max and Bella joined him, forming a protective semicircle around Jack's hands as he cradled the tiny feline. "Easy now," Jack warned, expecting the dogs to show some aggression toward the interloper, but something remarkable happened instead. Duke gently licked the kitten's wet fur, an instinctive gesture of care that left Jack speechless. The kitten mewled pathetically, its tiny body cold and limp in Jack's calloused hands. "Guess we better get you home and dried off," he said, tucking the small bundle inside his jacket. "Just until we find you a proper home," he added, as if Sarah might be listening. Back at the house, Jack filled a hot water bottle and wrapped it in a towel, creating a makeshift bed for the kitten in a cardboard box in the kitchen. The 3 German shepherds watched with intense curiosity as he used a dropper to feed the kitten some warmed milk. "Don't get attached," Jack told the dogs sternly. "Tomorrow we'll take it to Dr. Parker and find it a good home." But that night, Jack awoke to find his bed empty of dogs, an unusual occurrence, as at least one of them typically slept near him since Sarah died. Following the sound of soft whining, he discovered all 3 German shepherds curled protectively around the cardboard box, Duke's large body closest to the kitten, providing warmth and security. Well, I'll be damned, Jack murmured, witnessing something he couldn't quite explain. Morning brought sunshine and a more energetic kitten. Dr. Parker examined the small tabby with professional detachment. She's about 5 weeks old, malnourished but no serious injuries. Lucky you found her when you did. So you'll find a home for her? Jack asked, ignoring the strange pang in his chest. Dr. Parker raised an eyebrow. I thought you might want to keep her. Sarah always wanted. I know what Sarah wanted, Jack interrupted, his voice gruff with emotion. But I've got 3 dogs. They're not exactly cat-friendly. Dr. Parker mused, glancing at the 3 well-behaved German shepherds sitting patiently in the waiting room. They seem pretty invested in this kitten's welfare from what I can see. Jack followed his gaze and noticed Duke's eyes fixed intently on the examination room door, as if he could see through it to the tiny creature beyond. Just until she's stronger, Jack conceded reluctantly. Then she goes to a proper home. Days turned into weeks, and Jack found himself falling into a new routine. The kitten, whom he had started calling Luna after the crescent-shaped marking on her forehead, grew stronger daily. What astonished Jack was how the 3 German shepherds had appointed themselves as Luna's guardians and teachers. Duke, typically aloof and dignified, would gently pick Luna up by the scruff when she tried to venture too close to the stairs. Max, always the energetic one, tempered his play when Luna joined in, lying on his back and allowing the kitten to pounce on his stomach. Bella, the youngest and most intelligent of the 3, seemed to be teaching Luna the household rules, sitting patiently beside her food bowl until given permission to eat, a behavior the dogs had learned years ago. It's not natural. Margaret Wilson sniffed when she stopped by with a casserole one evening, one of the endless parade of pitying food deliveries since Sarah's death. Cats and dogs are natural enemies. You're confusing that poor kitten. Luna chose that moment to toddle into the living room, followed closely by her 3 canine shadows. When she stumbled, Duke was there immediately, nudging her gently back onto her feet. Doesn't look confused to me, Jack remarked dryly, watching the interspecies family with growing wonder. As Luna grew stronger, Jack's resolve to find her another home weakened. There was something about watching the unlikely bond develop between predator and prey, something that spoke to Jack's wounded heart about unexpected connections and second chances. What do you think, Sarah? He asked the empty room one night, Luna purring on his lap while the 3 dogs lay at his feet. Is this what you had in mind all along? The answering silence didn't feel quite as empty as before. By the 6-month mark, Jack had stopped pretending Luna was temporary. The cardboard box had been replaced by a proper cat bed, though Luna rarely used it. Preferring to sleep nestled between Duke and Bella, Jack watched with amazement as Luna began to adopt more and more canine behaviors, coming when called, waiting at the door for walks, even attempting to bark along with the dogs when the mail carrier arrived. We've created a monster, Jack chuckled to himself, but there was pride in his voice. Pride and something else that felt suspiciously like healing. 1 year after Sarah's passing, Jack sat on his porch swing watching the unusual scene unfold in his backyard. Luna, now a full-grown tabby with striking gray stripes, was participating in what could only be described as dog training when Jack whistled and called, "Come." All 3 German shepherds obediently raced toward him with Luna keeping perfect pace alongside them, her smaller legs working double time to match their stride. Good girl, Luna, Jack praised, offering her a small treat just as he did for Duke, Max, and Bella. The cat took it delicately, sitting on her haunches exactly like her canine siblings, waiting for the next command. Jack shook his head in wonder. "Sarah, you wouldn't believe this if you saw it," he whispered to the spring breeze. The grief still visited him daily, but its edges had softened, worn smooth by the constant companionship of his unusual family. "Jack Thompson." The sharp voice of Margaret Wilson cut through his reverie. His neighbor of 15 years stood at the fence line, arms crossed over her floral blouse, her silver hair pulled into a tight bun. "I need to speak with you about that cat." Jack sighed. Margaret had been making her disapproval known ever since Luna had become a permanent fixture in his household. "What about her?" "Margaret, it's not right, what you're doing," she said, marching through the gate and up the path. "I've been reading about this. Animals need to be with their own kind. They need to develop naturally." She gestured toward Luna, who was now play wrestling with Max on the lawn. "That cat doesn't even know it's a cat. She seems happy enough to me," Jack replied mildly. "Happy? She's confused. She's living against her nature." Margaret's voice rose. "I've spoken with Dr. Parker about it. He agrees that this situation is highly unusual." Jack's jaw tightened. "You went to Alan Parker about my pets? Someone had to speak up for that poor creature's welfare." Margaret sniffed. "He says he wants to observe her, maybe write a paper about her abnormal behavior. And if he determines this environment is harmful—" She let the threat hang in the air. "Are you saying you'd report me for what, loving my animals?" Jack stood, his tall frame casting a shadow over the smaller woman. Margaret took a step back but held her ground. "For creating an unnatural situation that could be harmful to a domestic animal. There are laws." "Jack." Before Jack could respond, Duke approached, sensing his master's distress. The large German shepherd positioned himself between Jack and Margaret, not growling but watchful. To Jack's surprise, Luna padded up alongside Duke, mimicking his protective stance, her tail swishing slowly back and forth like a dog on alert. Margaret pointed triumphantly. "See that right there? Cats don't stand guard like that. You've got that animal so confused, she doesn't know who she is anymore." Jack knelt down, placing a calming hand on Duke's head and another on Luna's back. "I think she knows exactly who she is, Margaret. She's family." The confrontation with Margaret left Jack unsettled. That evening, he called Dr. Parker directly, who confirmed that Margaret had indeed been in his office, expressing concerns about Luna's psychological welfare. "I did tell her it was unusual," Dr. Parker admitted over the phone. "But I also said that without observing the animals in their home environment, I couldn't make any judgments about whether it was harmful." "And is it?" Jack asked. "Harmful? I mean, for Luna to be raised by dogs?" There was a pause. "Scientifically speaking, animals do best when they learn appropriate species behaviors from their own kind. Luna may have some challenges if she ever needs to interact with other cats." "She's not interested in other cats," Jack said. "She's got her family right here." "That's exactly what concerns me," Dr. Parker replied gently. "Jack, I've known you for years. I know you wouldn't intentionally harm any animal, but perhaps it would be best if Luna had some feline companionship. Maybe consider adopting another cat." The suggestion felt like a betrayal of the special bond that had formed among his animals. "I'll think about it," he said non-committally before hanging up. That night, A small kitchen fire tested Luna's unusual upbringing in a way Jack never expected. He'd fallen asleep in his armchair. A pot of soup forgotten on the stove. The smoke detector failed to go off. The battery had died weeks ago. A maintenance task Jack had been putting off. It was Luna who alerted him. Not with the typical feline response of fleeing from danger, but by barking, or rather, making a strange yowling sound that was her best approximation of a bark. When that failed to rouse him fully, she jumped onto his lap and pulled at his shirt sleeve with her teeth. Just as she'd seen the dogs do during their training sessions, Jack awoke to the sight of smoke curling from the kitchen and Luna tugging insistently at his sleeve, while Duke, Max, and Bella circled anxiously nearby. "Good Lord," he gasped, rushing to extinguish the small fire that had started around the pot. Once the danger had passed, he sat heavily at the kitchen table, looking at Luna with new eyes. "You saved my hide there, girl." Word spread quickly through Pinewood about Luna's heroics. The story grew with each retelling by the time it reached the local diner. Luna had supposedly dragged Jack from a burning building. Dr. Parker called to check on him, and even Margaret brought over a fresh apple pie, though she still muttered about unnatural behaviors. "I don't care what anyone says," Jack told Luna as she curled up on his lap that evening, purring contentedly while the 3 German shepherds dozed nearby. "You're perfect, just as you are." The incident marked a turning point for Jack. No longer would he apologize for or question the unusual bond among his animals. If Luna wanted to think she was a dog, who was he to argue? Wasn't happiness the important thing? His newfound confidence was tested the following week when he decided to take all 4 animals to the town park, something he'd hesitated to do before. Knowing it would draw attention, Luna walked on a leash like the dogs, trotting alongside them with her tail held high. The reactions ranged from amusement to confusion to outright disapproval. Other dog owners kept their distance, uncertain how their pets might react to the cat who didn't act like a cat. The few other cats in the park, mostly neighborhood strays who hunted in the surrounding bushes, arched their backs and hissed when Luna approached them in friendly greeting. "She doesn't understand why they're afraid of her," Jack explained to a curious young girl who'd stopped to watch. "She thinks everybody should get along like her family does." "So she thinks she's a dog," the girl said matter-of-factly. "My grandma says it's weird. Is your grandma Margaret Wilson, by any chance?" Jack asked dryly. The girl nodded. "I'm Emily. I think your cat is cool. Can I pet her?" While Emily gently stroked Luna's fur, the cat responded with a behavior that made Jack laugh out loud. She offered her paw to shake, just as the German shepherds had been trained to do. "See, she knows tricks," Emily exclaimed delightedly. "She certainly does," came a familiar voice. Dr. Parker approached, observing the interaction with professional interest. "May I?" he asked. Kneeling down beside Luna, Jack nodded, watching warily as the veterinarian examined Luna's responses to various stimuli, a dog treat versus a cat treat, a small toy mouse versus a ball. Luna consistently chose the dog options, even going so far as to fetch a thrown ball and bring it back, dropping it at Dr. Parker's feet expectantly. "Remarkable," he murmured. "I've read about cases like this, but I've never seen one so pronounced." He looked up at Jack. "You know, this doesn't have to be a bad thing. Luna's adaptability is actually quite extraordinary." "So, you're not going to report me for animal mistreatment?" Jack asked pointedly. Dr. Parker had the grace to look embarrassed. Margaret was concerned, and as a veterinarian, I had to take her concern seriously. But now that I've observed Luna—" He gestured to where the tabby was now lying between Duke and Bella, perfectly content. "I'd say she's one of the most well-adjusted cats I've ever seen, even if her adjustment has taken an unusual form." As they walked home, Jack felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Even Dr. Parker now saw what he had known all along, that family wasn't about what species you belonged to, but about the bonds you formed and the love you shared. That evening, Jack made a decision. He'd spent too long living in the shadow of grief, letting others dictate what was right for him and his unusual family. Sarah would have loved Luna, and her dog-like ways would have delighted in the unexpected joy that had come from that rainy day rescue. Time to start living again. He told his attentive audience of 3 dogs and 1 cat. Sarah would kick my behind if she could see me moping around all this time. Luna meowed or barked. It was hard to tell sometimes, in apparent agreement. As spring blossomed into summer, Luna's remarkable integration into her canine family continued to evolve in ways that both delighted Jack and occasionally left him speechless. The gray tabby had grown into a sleek, muscular cat, with the confident bearing of her German Shepherd siblings. What had once seemed like simple mimicry had developed into a complex set of behaviors that blurred the line between feline and canine identity. Each morning began the same way. Jack would wake to find all 4 animals curled together at the foot of his bed. Luna typically nestled between Duke's front paws or pressed against Bella's side. When Jack rose, they would stretch in near-perfect synchronization before padding downstairs for breakfast, where Luna would sit in line with the dogs, waiting patiently for her food bowl to be placed alongside theirs. "You're the darndest thing," Jack often told Luna as she waited with the same disciplined stillness as Duke, while Max's tail betrayed his excitement and Bella occasionally whined in anticipation. Unlike typical cats who would weave impatiently between their owner's legs or meow insistently, Luna had adopted the German Shepherd's trained restraint. Only after Jack gave the release command, "Okay, eat up," would all 4 animals approach their bowls. Luna had even developed the habit of taking a few bites, then backing away to scan the yard through the kitchen window. Mimicking Duke's protective vigilance during meals, one warm Tuesday morning in June, Jack decided to try something he'd been considering for weeks. Instead of placing Luna's food in a cat bowl, he served it in a dog dish identical to those used by Duke, Max, and Bella. Without hesitation, Luna approached the larger bowl and began eating, seemingly more comfortable with this arrangement than with her previous cat-sized dishes. "Well, I'll be," Jack murmured, watching as she naturally adopted the wider stance typical of the dogs while eating from the larger bowl. It was as though her body instinctively knew how to compensate, her movements becoming more canine with each passing day. Their walks had become the talk of Pinewood. Jack had fashioned a special harness for Luna after she'd consistently demonstrated her desire to join the dogs on their daily excursions. Unlike most cats who fought against leashes, Luna pranced proudly alongside her larger companions, matching their pace and stopping when they stopped, even lifting her leg at interesting scents, though the biological differences made this gesture purely symbolic. "There goes the crazy dog-cat man," Jack would hear people whisper as he passed with his unusual entourage. Some laughed, some shook their heads disapprovingly, but increasingly, people would cross the street specifically to get a closer look at Luna. Children especially were drawn to the novelty, and Jack found himself answering the same questions repeatedly. "No, she wasn't raised by wolves," he'd explain patiently. "Just these 3 characters here." He'd gesture to the German Shepherds, who maintained protective positions around Luna whenever strangers approached. Emily Davis had become a regular visitor to Jack's home, despite her grandmother Margaret's initial disapproval. The 10-year-old had developed a fascination with Luna that bordered on scientific interest. She kept a small notebook where she documented Luna's behaviors, comparing them with those of normal cats she observed around the neighborhood. "Luna doesn't play with string the way other cats do," she reported one afternoon, sitting cross-legged on Jack's living room floor. "She wants to play fetch and tug-of-war instead." Jack nodded, watching as Luna enthusiastically chased the tennis ball Emily had rolled across the floor, returning it with a proud trot that mirrored Max's retrieving style perfectly. "She likes what she likes," he said simply. "Grandma says it's because she's confused," Emily continued, her pencil scratching across the page of her notebook. "But I don't think Luna's confused at all. I think she knows exactly who she is." From the mouth of babes, Jack thought. The girl had articulated what he felt, but couldn't quite express that Luna's identity wasn't about conforming to what a cat should be, but about being authentically herself, whatever form that took. The neighborhood cats, however, did not share Emily's accepting view. Jack's backyard had become something of a feline no-go zone, with local cats giving it a wide berth. After several bewildering encounters with Luna, she would approach them with the direct, confident gait of a dog, lacking the cautious circling and elaborate body language typically employed by cats meeting for the first time. When she tried to initiate play by bowing down on her front paws and wagging her tail, a classic dog invitation, the other cats would arch their backs, hiss, and flee. "Poor Luna doesn't understand why they don't want to play," Jack remarked to Dr. Sean Parker during a routine checkup visit for all 4 animals. "It's like they're speaking different languages." "In a sense, they are, Doctor," Parker replied, watching as Luna sat obediently on the examination table, allowing herself to be handled with the same cooperative nature as the German Shepherds. Luna's primary socialization was with dogs during her developmental period. She missed the window when kittens typically learned cat-specific communication. "Is she unhappy, do you think?" Jack asked, voicing the concern that occasionally nagged at him, especially after witnessing Luna's repeated rejection by other cats. Dr. Parker considered the question thoughtfully, while Luna jumped down from the table and immediately positioned herself between Duke and Bella, leaning against Bella's front leg in a gesture of clear contentment. "Happiness is subjective," the veterinarian finally said. "But if we define it as being secure in one's environment, having strong social bonds, and displaying natural play and exploration behaviors, then I'd say Luna is one of the happiest cats I've ever treated." He smiled at Jack. "She's just happy in a uniquely Luna way." The validation eased Jack's mind. But not everyone in Pinewood shared Dr. Parker's perspective. Margaret Wilson had been gathering allies for what she called her proper pet ownership campaign. What had begun as one woman's meddling had evolved into a small but vocal group of townspeople who felt that Jack's unusual pet family represented something troubling. "It's not just about one confused cat," Margaret declared at a community meeting held at the town hall in late July. "It's about maintaining natural order. Next thing you know, people will be claiming their goldfish thinks it's a hamster." Jack sat at the back of the room, listening with a mixture of amusement and irritation as Margaret outlined her concerns to the 24 attendees. Mayor Thompson, no relation to Jack, looked particularly uncomfortable, clearly wishing he were anywhere but moderating this peculiar debate. "Mrs. Wilson," the mayor said cautiously, "while we appreciate your concern for animal welfare, I'm not sure there's any town ordinance being violated here. Mr. Thompson's animals are well cared for, properly licensed, and not causing any disturbance." "Not causing a disturbance," Margaret's voice rose an octave. "That cat tried to join the 4th of July dog parade. It disrupted the entire event." Jack suppressed a smile at the memory. Luna had indeed broken away from his hold during the town's Independence Day celebration. Racing to join the line of dogs parading down Main Street, she had fallen into perfect formation alongside an astonished golden retriever, marching with such conviction that several spectators had applauded what they assumed was a planned novelty act. "The parade committee actually wants to feature Luna next year," Jack pointed out mildly. "They think she'd be a popular addition." Margaret's face flushed red. "This isn't about popularity. It's about what's right for the animals." "With all due respect, Margaret," Dr. Parker spoke up from his seat near the front. "As the town's veterinarian, I've observed Luna extensively, and she shows all signs of being a well-adjusted, healthy animal. Her unusual behavior doesn't appear to cause her any distress. But what about the larger implications?" This came from Herbert Jenkins, the town's most notorious stickler for rules and regulations. "If we allow this kind of unnatural animal raising, where does it end?" Jack had heard enough. He stood, his tall frame commanding attention even from the back of the room. "Folks, I understand this seems strange to some of you. Truth is, it seems strange to me sometimes too. But when I found that half-drowned kitten a year ago, I never planned on keeping her, let alone raising her to think she's a dog. It just happened, natural as breathing." He looked around the room, making eye contact with his neighbors, some supportive, some skeptical, all listening. "My wife Sarah died wanting to add a cat to our family. Maybe this is her way of still being with us. I don't know. What I do know is that Luna and those 3 dogs saved me from drowning in grief just as surely as I saved Luna from that flood. So you can call me crazy if you want. Call Luna confused if it makes you feel better. But we're a family, an unusual one, I grant you, and we're not hurting anybody." The room fell silent. Even Margaret seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Finally, Mayor Thompson cleared his throat. "Well said, Jack. Unless anyone has an actual legal concern to raise, I think we can consider this matter closed." The meeting dispersed, but Jack knew the debate was far from over. Pinewood was a small town, and anything out of the ordinary became fodder for ongoing discussion. He'd become the crazy dog-cat man in local parlance, a label that might have bothered him once, but now he wore with a certain pride. As summer progressed, Jack began working on a project that had been in the back of his mind for months. Sarah had kept detailed journals throughout their marriage, documenting everything from daily observations to profound reflections. In his grief, Jack had initially found them too painful to read, but now he turned to them for inspiration as he began writing about Luna's remarkable journey, the tabby who thought she was a German shepherd. He titled the first entry, "Sitting at his desk while Luna dozed at his feet," her head resting on Duke's paw, in a gesture that still melted Jack's heart, no matter how many times he witnessed it. He wrote about finding her in the storm, about her gradual integration into the dog pack, about the countless moments of bewilderment and joy her unusual adaptation had brought him. He wrote about the healing her presence had facilitated, how caring for this strange little family had pulled him out of the darkest period of his life. "Sarah would have loved you," he told Luna one evening as he finished another journal entry. "She always said, 'Animals are wiser than humans give them credit for. You figured out what you needed to survive and thrive, and you didn't let anyone else's expectations get in your way.'" Luna looked up at him with eyes that seemed to understand every word. then yawned and stretched in the distinctive full-body elongation of a cat before settling back into a perfect impression of a dog's alert sitting posture. The contradiction made Jack chuckle. Luna wasn't just a cat who thought she was a dog. She was both, simultaneously, comfortably inhabiting the borderland between species. By August, Luna had developed yet another dog-like behavior that astounded even Jack. During a thunderstorm that rattled the windows of his old farmhouse, Emily had come over to work on her Luna observation project, only to become frightened by the booming thunder. As the girl trembled on the couch, Luna approached and placed her paw gently on Emily's knee, a gesture of comfort she had observed countless times from Duke, the most empathetic of the 3 German shepherds. "She's trying to make you feel better," Jack explained as Emily's eyes widened in surprise. "Duke does that when anyone's upset. She's like a therapy cat," Emily whispered, her fear momentarily forgotten as she stroked Luna's striped fur. But she learned it from a therapy dog. The incident gave Jack an idea. The Pinewood Retirement Home had a monthly visit from therapy dogs, and Dr. Bear Parker was one of the program coordinators. After discussing it with the veterinarian, Jack began training Luna alongside Duke for potential therapy work. While cats could technically be therapy animals, they rarely exhibited the consistent responsiveness to commands necessary for formal certification. Luna, however, was proving to be an exception. "Sit," Jack would instruct, and Luna would drop into a perfect sitting position alongside Duke, her tail wrapped neatly around her paws. "Stay," he'd command. Walking backward several paces, both Duke and Luna would remain motionless until released. "Gentle," he'd say, placing a treat on his palm. Both animals would take it with exquisite care, Duke using his front teeth delicately, and Luna employing a precision that belied her carnivore heritage. Dr. Parker observed these training sessions with growing fascination. "I've been reading the scientific literature," he informed Jack during one visit. "There are documented cases of interspecies behavioral adoption, but they're rare and typically not as comprehensive as what we're seeing with Luna. She's not just mimicking the dogs, she's internalized their social cues and communication system." "Is that your scientific way of saying she really thinks she's a dog?" Jack asked with a smile. "Let's say she has a dog-like understanding of the world." Dr. Parker replied diplomatically, "The really interesting question is, does it matter what she thinks she is, as long as she's thriving?" Jack pondered that question frequently as summer waned into early fall. Did it matter that Luna lacked typical feline behaviors, that she approached life with canine sensibilities? She was healthy, active, and by all observable measures, content with her unusual place in the world. The first truly cold day in September brought an unexpected visitor to Jack's door. Margaret Wilson stood on his porch, her usual stern expression softened by something that might have been uncertainty. "May I come in, Jack?" she asked. "I'd like to observe Luna for myself." "In her home environment?" Jack raised an eyebrow but stepped aside to allow Margaret entry. "What brought this on?" "Emily hasn't stopped talking about that cat for months," Margaret admitted, following Jack into the living room, where Luna and the 3 German shepherds were arranged in their typical formation on the large rug. "And I've been doing some reading of my own." Luna regarded the visitor with mild interest, remaining in her spot between Duke and Bella, but raising her head alertly in a gesture identical to the dog's. "Go ahead and call her," Margaret suggested. "I want to see what happens." "Luna, come," Jack said clearly. And without hesitation, the tabby trotted to his side, sitting and looking up expectantly. "Good girl," Jack praised, offering a small treat which Luna accepted delicately. Margaret watched with narrowed eyes. "Now call one of the dogs away from the others." Jack complied. "Max, come." The middle German shepherd approached, taking position beside Luna. "Interesting," Margaret murmured. "They respond individually, not just as a group." She pursed her lips. "May I try?" Jack nodded, curious about where this was going. "Luna," Margaret called, her voice lacking its usual sharpness. To Jack's surprise, Luna walked over to Margaret and sat, looking up with the attentive expression she'd learned from the dogs. "Well, I never," Margaret breathed, tentatively extending her hand. Luna nudged it with her head, another behavior borrowed from her canine family. "She really does think, she really does behave just like them. She's just Luna," Jack said simply. "She is what she is." Something in Margaret's expression shifted, a subtle softening around the eyes. "I suppose there are worse things than a cat who thinks she's a dog," she conceded. "Emily says Luna makes you happy." "She does," Jack acknowledged. "All of them do. They saved me after Sarah died, gave me a reason to keep going." Margaret nodded slowly. "Robert, my husband, passed 10 years ago. I understand about needing something to hold on to." She straightened her shoulders. "I still think it's unusual, mind you, but perhaps unusual isn't always bad." It wasn't quite an apology, but from Margaret Wilson, it was as close as one might expect. As she departed, Jack felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The town gossip's tentative acceptance might just pave the way for broader community understanding. That evening, as Jack sat on his porch watching the sunset with his four-legged family arranged around him, he reflected on the strange journey of the past year, from the depths of grief to this quiet contentment. From lonely widower to the caretaker of Pinewood's most unusual family, it had been a transformation as remarkable as Luna's own evolution. "We're all adapting," he told the animals as darkness fell, "all finding our way together." Luna stretched, yawned in her distinctly feline way, then settled back into a perfect dog-like sitting position. Her mismatched behaviors a living reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things in life are those that defy easy categorization. In her own unique way, she had helped heal not just Jack's heart, but also, perhaps, a small corner of Pinewood's collective understanding of what family could mean. The sky darkened ominously over Pinewood as October brought the first major storm of the season. Weather forecasters had been warning about it for days, a massive system moving in from the west, bringing potential flash flooding to areas still saturated from an unusually wet September. Jack had been preparing his property as best he could, moving valuables to higher shelves and checking that the sump pump in his basement was functioning properly. "Looks like we're in for a rough one," he told his furry companions as they gazed out the living room window at the blackening sky. Duke stood tall and alert, while Max and Bella pressed closer to Jack's legs. Luna, ever the mimic, had adopted Duke's vigilant posture. Her gray-striped tail held straight instead of curling upward as most cats would. The first raindrops hit the roof around noon, a gentle patter that quickly intensified into a deafening downpour. By mid-afternoon, the creek that ran along the edge of Jack's property had swollen to twice its normal size, creeping steadily up the sloping lawn toward his house. The phone rang sharply, cutting through the sound of rain hammering on the roof. It was Mayor Thompson, his voice tight with concern. "Jack," We're issuing a mandatory evacuation for your area," he said without preamble. "Carson Creek is overflowing upstream, and the projection models show your neighborhood underwater by nightfall." "Understood," Jack replied, already mentally calculating what he needed to take. "Is the community center being set up as a shelter again?" "It is," the mayor confirmed. "But Jack, there's something you should know. Given the number of people being evacuated, the shelter committee has decided that pets will have to be housed separately in the old elementary school gym." Jack's grip tightened on the phone. "All 4 of them?" "I'm afraid so. And, the mayor hesitated. "Margaret Wilson is on the shelter committee. She's insisting that the cat would be more appropriately housed with other cats, not with the dogs." A spark of anger flared in Jack's chest. After all these months, after Margaret had seemed to soften her stance during her visit to his home, she was still trying to separate his unusual family. "That's not going to work for us," Jack said firmly. "Luna doesn't do well separated from her siblings." "I understand your concern," the mayor said, though his tone suggested he didn't really. "But the committee's decision is final. We need to maintain order during this emergency situation." Jack glanced at his animals, Duke standing protectively near Luna. Max and Bella huddled together on their favorite rug. He couldn't imagine forcing them apart during a frightening situation like this. "We'll make other arrangements," he said shortly, and hung up. Within an hour, Jack had loaded his pickup truck with essential supplies, photo albums including Sarah's, medications, and enough pet food for several days. Getting all 4 animals into the truck cab was a tight squeeze. Luna sat on the center console, while the 3 German shepherds crammed into the passenger seat and footwell, a feat only possible due to their excellent training and Luna's small size. The rain was falling in blinding sheets as Jack navigated the increasingly treacherous roads toward higher ground. Water already covered the lowest parts of Main Street, and emergency vehicles raced past with sirens wailing. The usual 20-minute drive to the community center took nearly an hour in the hazardous conditions. The parking lot was crowded with the vehicles of other evacuees when Jack finally arrived. Volunteers in bright yellow raincoats directed traffic and helped people unload their belongings. Jack spotted Margaret almost immediately. She was stationed at the entrance, clipboard in hand, directing families with practiced efficiency. Taking a deep breath, Jack leashed all 4 animals and approached the shelter entrance, rain plastering his gray hair to his scalp despite the hat he wore. The German shepherds moved in perfect formation beside him, with Luna trotting along in their midst, her leash hardly necessary given how closely she mimicked their disciplined walking style. Margaret's eyes narrowed when she saw him approaching with all 4 animals. "Jack," she said, voice clipped, "the pet shelter is at the elementary school, 2 blocks east." "I understand that," Jack replied calmly. "But we're staying together, all of us." "That's not possible," Margaret insisted. "The committee decided—" "I don't give a damn what the committee decided," Jack interrupted, his patience worn thin by concern for his home and the stress of evacuation. "These animals are a family unit. Separating them during a crisis would be cruel and unnecessary." Other evacuees had begun to watch the confrontation with interest. Jack noticed Emily standing nearby, her eyes wide with concern as she clutched a stuffed animal to her chest. "Rules are rules, Jack," Margaret said, though he detected a hint of uncertainty in her voice. "The dogs go to the canine section, the cat to the feline section. That's how we maintain order." "Your order doesn't account for exceptions," Jack argued. Luna has never been separated from her family. She'd be terrified. She's a cat. Jack, she belongs with other cats. She doesn't know that. Emily piped up suddenly, stepping forward despite her grandmother's disapproving glare. Luna thinks she's a dog. She'd be scared with other cats. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line as she looked from her granddaughter to Jack and his unusual family. Around them, the storm intensified, wind driving the rain sideways and rattling the community center's windows. "This isn't up for debate," she finally said. "I'm sorry, Jack, but we can't make exceptions." Jack straightened to his full height, rainwater dripping from his hat brim. "Then we'll find shelter elsewhere." "I won't separate them." "In this weather, don't be foolish," Margaret scolded. "Where would you even go?" "We'll sleep in my truck if we have to," Jack said firmly. "It's parked on high ground." "Grandma, please," Emily pleaded, tugging at Margaret's raincoat. "Luna needs to stay with Duke and the others. She gets scared without them." Margaret looked from her granddaughter's imploring face to Jack's resolute one, then down at the 4 animals standing patiently in the rain. Luna had pressed herself against Duke's leg, a gesture so canine in its seeking of reassurance that even Margaret couldn't miss its significance. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she muttered. "Fine. You can keep them together in the storage room at the back. It's small, but it's private. Just keep that cat from disturbing the other evacuees." Relief flooded through Jack. "Thank you, Margaret. I appreciate it." She waved away his gratitude. "Don't make me regret this. Jack Thompson." The storage room was indeed small, but it was dry and quiet, with enough space for Jack to arrange blankets into comfortable bedding for himself and his animals. As the storm raged outside, they settled in for what promised to be a long night. Luna curled up between Duke and Bella while Max kept watch by the door. Jack had just begun to doze when a commotion outside the room jolted him awake. Raised voices and hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway. Duke was immediately alert, ears pricked forward, with Luna mirroring his posture perfectly beside him. The door flew open, revealing a rain-drenched volunteer whose name badge identified him as Tom. "We need help," he said breathlessly. "A family hasn't shown up at any of the shelters, and they've got a little girl, the Davises, from Creek Road." Jack was on his feet in an instant. "Emily's parents. But Emily's here with Margaret." "Emily's here with her grandmother because her parents dropped her off before going back to secure their house," Tom explained. "They were supposed to evacuate right after, but no one's heard from them in hours." "Where exactly on Creek Road?" Jack asked, already reaching for his coat. "About a mile past your place," Tom said. "Search and rescue is overwhelmed with calls. They can't get there for at least 2 hours." Creek Road followed Carson Creek for several miles before branching off toward the mountains. If the Davises lived a mile past Jack's property, they were in one of the most flood-prone areas of Pinewood. "I know that area well," Jack said grimly. "I'm going to help look for them." "In this weather, that's suicide," Tom protested. "The creek's already breached its banks in multiple places. All the more reason to find them quickly," Jack replied, already pulling on his boots. "I'm calling in the county rescue team," Tom insisted. "They have boats, proper equipment, and they're 2 hours away." Jack reminded him. A lot can happen in 2 hours during a flood. He looked down at his animals, who were all watching him intently. Without consciously deciding, he reached for their leashes. Duke, Max, and Bella had all been trained in basic search and rescue techniques years ago, Sarah had volunteered with the local wilderness rescue team and had insisted on training their dogs. They weren't certified rescue dogs, but they were intelligent and responsive to commands. And Luna? Well, Luna would go wherever her family went. "You're taking your pets," Tom asked incredulously, "into a flood zone. These aren't just pets," Jack said, clipping on the leashes. "They're the best search team we've got right now." The rain had temporarily lessened when Jack and his animals emerged from the community center. Though the wind still howled ominously between buildings, Margaret stood under the shelter of the entrance overhang, her face pale with worry as Tom explained the situation. "Emily's frantic," she told Jack. "Her parents were supposed to call once they got to a shelter." "We'll find them," Jack promised, though he knew better than to make guarantees in weather like this. "I'm coming with you," Margaret declared, reaching for her raincoat. "Absolutely not," Jack said firmly. "The best thing you can do for Emily is stay here with her. I've got Duke, Max, and Bella. They're good trackers." "And Luna?" Margaret asked, eyeing the cat who stood alertly beside the German shepherds, seemingly unbothered by the rain soaking her gray-striped fur. Jack hadn't actually planned to take Luna into the dangerous conditions, but she had moved to stand by Duke with such determination that he hesitated to separate her from the others. "Luna goes where her family goes," he said simply. To his surprise, Margaret nodded. "Be careful, Jack, all of you." Her usual disapproval was nowhere in evidence, replaced by genuine concern. The drive back toward Creek Road was treacherous. Twice, Jack had to detour around flooded sections of road, and once he nearly lost control on a curve where mud had washed across the pavement. By the time he reached the turnoff to the Davis property, water covered the road to a depth of several inches, rushing across the asphalt with alarming speed. "This is as far as we drive," Jack told his companions, pulling the truck onto a slight rise that offered some protection from the rising water. "From here, we go on foot." Bam. The Davis house was barely visible through the curtain of rain, a two-story structure set back from the road atop a small hill. In normal conditions, the creek would be a good 100 yards from their front door. But tonight, angry brown water had already swallowed half that distance. Jack released Duke, Max, and Bella from their leashes, knowing they would stay close. Luna he kept tethered, unwilling to risk her smaller size in the dangerous conditions. "Find," he commanded the dogs, a search instruction they remembered from their training with Sarah. "Find people." The German shepherds immediately fanned out, noses to the ground despite the rain, working methodically across the property. Luna watched their movements intently, then began mimicking Duke's search pattern, her nose twitching as she tried to scent the air like her canine siblings. That was when Jack heard it, a faint cry barely audible above the storm. He turned toward the sound, squinting through the rain, and saw a flash of color on the far side of the property, where a detached garage stood on slightly lower ground. The structure was already partially submerged, water reaching halfway up its walls. "Over there," he shouted to his dogs, pointing toward the garage. Duke immediately altered course. With Max and Bella following, Jack hurried after them, struggling against the force of the water now rushing around his knees. As they drew closer, Jack could make out two figures waving frantically from the garage's second-floor window, a man and a woman he recognized as the Davises. What he hadn't expected was the sudden, sharp bark from Luna, or rather, the closest approximation to a bark that her feline vocal cords could produce. The gray tabby was straining at her leash, pulling Jack toward a fallen tree that created a partial bridge across the deepest part of the floodwater. Before Jack could stop her, Luna had wriggled free of her harness and was dashing across the log with the agility only a cat could possess. "Luna!" Jack called out in alarm, but she was already on the other side, racing toward the garage with purpose. The 3 German shepherds immediately followed her lead, swimming powerfully through the rushing water where the log didn't provide passage. In that moment, watching his improbable family work together against the elements, Jack understood that he was witnessing something extraordinary. Luna hadn't just learned to mimic dog behaviors. She had internalized their sense of purpose, their drive to help, and now, in the most crucial moment, she was leading the way. The rescue of the Davis family became the stuff of Pinewood legend. Through howling wind and rushing water, Jack and his remarkable animals had managed to guide Emily's parents to safety. Creating a human-animal chain across the treacherous floodwaters, Luna, small enough to navigate spaces the larger German shepherds couldn't access, had somehow communicated to the dogs and then to Jack that there was a narrow passage through the garage's storm cellar that provided the safest exit route. When they finally arrived back at the community center, soaked and exhausted but triumphant, even Margaret Wilson had applauded. Emily had thrown her arms around Jack's neck, then knelt to embrace each animal in turn, saving a special kiss for Luna's wet head. "You're heroes," she had whispered into the tabby's damp fur. "All of you." That triumphant night seemed a distant memory now. Just 2 weeks later, as Jack stood in the empty living room of his flood-damaged home, staring at the eviction notice in his hand, the storms had receded, leaving behind a swath of destruction across Pinewood. Jack's house, while still standing, had suffered significant water damage to its foundation, damage his landlord had deemed too expensive to repair. "Property's not worth salvaging," the man had said bluntly over the phone. "Insurance is paying me out. I'm selling the land to developers once it dries out enough for bulldozers. I've lived here 15 years. Jack had protested. "Sarah and I renovated the entire first floor ourselves." "Sorry, Jack. Business is business. You've got 30 days to find new accommodations. 30 days to find a place that would accept a 62-year-old man on a fixed income, along with 3 German shepherds and a cat who thought she was a dog." It seemed an impossible task in a town the size of Pinewood, where rental properties were scarce even in the best of times, let alone after a natural disaster. "What do you think?" Jack asked his animals as they gathered around him, sensing his distress. Duke pressed his large head against Jack's palm, while Bella leaned against his leg. Max paced anxiously, and Luna dear, peculiar. Luna sat at attention like the dogs, her gray striped tail swishing with concern. Jack had been investigating options for 2 days straight. The few available rentals in Pinewood all had strict pet policies, 1 pet maximum, or small pets only, or no pets at all. The nearest apartment complex that might accommodate his needs was in Riverville, 20 miles away, and even they balked at the idea of 3 large dogs. "It's not looking good," he admitted aloud. "We might have to split up." The very thought made his chest tighten painfully. After all they'd been through together, after the way these animals had helped him survive the darkest period of his life, the idea of separating them felt like a betrayal. But what choice did he have? Later that afternoon, Dr. Parker stopped by to check on them all. The veterinarian had been making rounds to all his clients affected by the flood, offering free wellness checks and medication refills for those cut off from his clinic. "How are they doing?" he asked, kneeling to examine each animal in turn. "Physically, they're fine," Jack replied. "But we've got a problem." He explained the eviction situation as Dr. Parker examined Luna, checking her eyes, ears, and coat for any flood-related issues. The tabby submitted to the examination with the same calm cooperation as her canine siblings had shown. "That's a tough break," Dr. Parker said sympathetically when Jack finished. "Have you considered temporarily fostering them out while you find a place that can take all of you?" Jack ran a hand over his face. "That's probably what it's going to come down to. I just hate the thought of separating them. Especially Luna. She's never been apart from the dogs." Dr. Parker nodded thoughtfully, watching as Luna returned to her customary position between Duke and Bella. "I could take Duke," he offered. "My apartment allows one large dog." "I appreciate that," Jack said sincerely. "Margaret Wilson might be willing to foster Luna," Dr. Parker suggested, though he looked doubtful even as he said it. "After the rescue, she's developed quite an interest in her—" Jack snorted. "Margaret spent months trying to convince me Luna should be with her own kind. I'm not sure I trust her to understand Luna's needs." Nevertheless, with few options and time running short, Jack found himself on Margaret Wilson's doorstep the following day, Luna's carrier in one hand and a bag of her supplies in the other. The 3 German shepherds had been left at home. Jack feared their reaction if they realized Luna was being taken away. "It's just for a little while," he assured the agitated tabby as Margaret opened her door. "Just until I find us a new place that will take everyone." Margaret's house was immaculate, all floral patterns and doilies, exactly what one would expect from a woman of her generation and temperament. "I've prepared a space for her," she said, leading Jack to a small room off the kitchen, a cat bed, litter box, scratching post, and toys had been arranged with perfect precision. "She's not used to being alone," Jack warned as he set down the carrier. "She might be very upset at first." "Emily and I have been reading about cat behavior," Margaret replied with unexpected gentleness. "We understand this will be an adjustment." Jack knelt and opened the carrier door. Luna emerged cautiously, her usual confidence absent in these unfamiliar surroundings. She looked up at Jack with an expression that nearly broke his heart. "It's just for a little while, girl," he repeated, scratching behind her ears. "Be good for Margaret and Emily." As he stood to leave, Luna tried to follow him, making the small chirping sound she used when she wanted to go for a walk with the dogs. Jack had to steel himself to close the door on her confused face. "I'll visit every day," he promised Margaret. "And if it's not working out, we'll manage," she assured him. "Emily is quite determined to make this work." The rest of the day passed in a blur of phone calls and apartment applications. By evening, Jack had secured temporary accommodations for Max with the Davises, who felt they owed him at least that much after the rescue. Bella would go to Tom from the community center, who had a fenced yard and a fondness for German shepherds. Dr. Parker had already collected Duke that morning. His house felt cavernous without them, empty in a way it hadn't been since Sarah died. Jack wandered from room to room, the silence pressing in on him from all sides. Even the task of packing his belongings couldn't distract him from the ache of separation. The phone rang shortly after 9 o'clock. It was Margaret, her voice tense. "Jack, we have a situation. Luna won't eat. She's just sitting by the door, making the strangest sounds." Jack's heart sank. "She's looking for her family, for the dogs. I was afraid this might happen. Emily's quite upset. She's tried everything, treats, toys, even that ridiculous dog command you use at mealtimes." Despite his concern, Jack had to smile at the image of Margaret Wilson trying to get a cat to respond to "Okay, eat up. I'll come first thing in the morning," he promised. Maybe seeing me will help settle her. But morning brought even worse news. Margaret called at dawn, her voice frantic. "Jack, Duke is here. On my front porch. He's scratching at the door and whining. I don't know how he got loose or found his way here, but he's absolutely determined to get inside." Jack was already pulling on his boots. "I'll be right there. Don't let him in yet. He might be too excited and scare Luna." "That's just it," Margaret said, her voice odd. "Luna heard him. She's at the window now, making those strange barking sounds. I've never seen anything like it." By the time Jack arrived at Margaret's house, a small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk. Duke sat on the front porch, his posture alert but calm, his eyes fixed on the living room window where Luna could be seen pacing back and forth, occasionally pressing a paw against the glass. "He showed up about an hour ago," Dr. Bob Parker explained, looking sheepish. "Somehow got through a locked door at my apartment. I've been trying to catch him, but he came straight here and won't budge." "How did he even know where to find her?" Margaret asked, standing in her doorway. "Dogs have an incredible sense of smell," Dr. R. Parker replied. "He must have picked up Luna's scent on Jack when he visited me yesterday." Jack approached Duke, who acknowledged him with a quick glance but kept his primary focus on the window. "You came for her, didn't you, boy?" Jack said softly, kneeling beside the large German shepherd. "You couldn't stand being separated either," Duke whined softly, a sound of such profound distress that Jack felt his own eyes welling up. Inside the house, Luna continued her frantic pacing. "I think we should let them see each other," Jack suggested, just to calm them both down. Margaret hesitated, then nodded. "Very well, but just for a moment. I don't want chaos in my living room." The moment the front door opened wide enough, Duke slipped through with surprising gentleness for such a large dog. He moved directly to where Luna waited, her small body quivering with anticipation. There was no barking, no excess of energy, just Duke lowering his head to touch noses with Luna, who immediately pressed her entire body against his front leg. The room fell silent as everyone watched the reunion. Even Margaret seemed moved by the obvious relief both animals displayed at being together again. "Well," she said finally, her voice unusually soft, "I suppose that settles that." "Settles what?" Jack asked, still watching the pair, Luna now purring audibly as she rubbed against Duke's chest, the big dog gently nuzzling her striped fur. Margaret straightened her shoulders. "They can't be separated. Anyone with eyes can see that. It would be cruel." The remarkable reunion between Duke and Luna catalyzed a change in Margaret Wilson that no one in Pinewood could have predicted. Standing in her immaculate living room, watching the German shepherd gently nuzzle the gray tabby cat, who responded with decidedly uncat-like affection, something shifted in the older woman's rigid worldview. "I've been wrong about this," she admitted quietly to Jack, her eyes never leaving the animals. "What these two have, what all of them have together, it's something special." Jack nodded, too moved by the scene to speak. Duke had positioned himself on Margaret's pristine floral rug, lying down with dignified calm, while Luna curled against his side, purring loudly enough for everyone to hear. The tabby occasionally reached out a paw to touch Duke's muzzle, as if reassuring herself that he was really there. "I knew cats and dogs could tolerate each other," Margaret continued, "but I've never seen anything like this. It's almost as if they're speaking a language only they understand." "Family," Jack said simply. "They're family." Emily arrived from school to find her grandmother's living room transformed into an impromptu animal sanctuary. Her face lit up at the sight of Duke and Luna together again, and she immediately dropped to her knees beside them, notebook in hand. "This is amazing data," she declared with the earnestness only a 10-year-old scientist could muster. Luna's stress behaviors completely disappeared as soon as Duke arrived. Her tail position changed from agitated to content, and her vocalization shifted from distress calls to communication sounds. Communication sounds. "Doctor," Parker asked, curious despite himself. Emily nodded vigorously. "Luna doesn't meow like a regular cat. She makes these special sounds when she's talking to the dogs, kind of between a meow and a bark. I've been recording them." While this unexpected reunion was unfolding at Margaret's house, Jack received a phone call that would further complicate matters. One of the nurses from Pinewood General Hospital had found the journal he'd been keeping about Luna and the dogs left behind during his brief visit to get a tetanus booster after cutting himself on debris during the flood cleanup. "Your story about the cat who thinks she's a dog has been making the rounds among our staff," the nurse explained. "It's the most uplifting thing we've read in ages. Several of us were wondering if you'd be willing to bring her in sometime, maybe to visit our pediatric patients." Jack glanced at Luna, now dozing contentedly against Duke's warm body. "It's complicated at the moment. We're currently without a home, and the animals are being separated temporarily." The nurse made a sympathetic noise. "That's terrible. Especially after reading about their bond. You know, my brother works for the Riverville Gazette. He'd love to do a feature on your unusual family. A newspaper story." Jack wasn't sure how to feel about that prospect. "Human interest pieces are his specialty," she continued enthusiastically. "And with the flood affecting so many people, a heartwarming story about a man and his unique pet family searching for a home might really resonate with readers." Jack was considering this unexpected turn of events when Dr. Parker approached him, an open book in his hands. "I thought you might find this interesting," he said, pointing to a paragraph. "It's from a veterinary journal I subscribe to. There's an entire section on interspecies bonding and behavioral adoption." Jack scanned the passage, which described several documented cases of animals raised with different species adopting behaviors not typical of their kind. None of the examples were quite as comprehensive as Luna's transformation, but they confirmed that what she had experienced wasn't entirely without precedent. The article suggests that these bonds can be crucial to the animal's psychological well-being. Dr. Parker continued, "Separating them can cause significant distress, as we've just witnessed with Duke and Luna." "Which brings us back to our immediate problem." Jack sighed. "I need to find housing that will accept all of us, and I'm running out of options." Margaret cleared her throat. "Perhaps I can assist with that." All eyes turned to her in surprise. "I know most of the property owners in Pinewood," she said, smoothing her skirt with precise movements. "Many of them owe me favors for various community services I've provided over the years. Let me make some calls." Jack was speechless. After months of Margaret campaigning against his unnatural pet arrangements, her offer of help seemed nothing short of miraculous. Emily beamed at her grandmother. "See, I told you Luna was special." "Yes. Well," Margaret sniffed, though her eyes were soft as she glanced at the animals. "I recognize determination when I see it. That cat has made her choice. And who am I to argue with such conviction?" The next few days brought surprising developments. Word of Duke's daring escape and journey to find Luna spread through Pinewood like wildfire, growing more elaborate with each retelling. By the weekend, local versions of the story had Duke swimming across flood-swollen rivers and navigating miles of treacherous terrain, guided only by love for his feline sister. Jack's journal about Luna, shared among hospital staff and then beyond, took on a life of its own. The nurse's brother did indeed write a feature for the Riverville Gazette, complete with photographs of all 4 animals that Emily had taken for her observation project. The headline read, "Man's Unusual Family Faces Homelessness After Flood. Cat Raised by German Shepherds Refuses Separation." Letters and emails began arriving from all over the county, people touched by the story, offering encouragement and, in some cases, practical help. A pet food company sent a month's supply of premium food for all 4 animals. A local carpenter volunteered to build custom shelving in whatever new home Jack found, to create proper cat highways that would accommodate Luna's dual nature. Most surprisingly, Dr. Parker brought academic attention to Luna's case. "I've been corresponding with a colleague at the State University who studies animal cognition," he explained to Jack one afternoon. "She's fascinated by Luna's adaptation and would like to document it, nothing invasive, just observation and perhaps some simple interaction tests. It could contribute significantly to our understanding of interspecies relationships." Jack was still absorbing all these developments when Luna provided yet another surprise. Margaret had temporarily moved Duke into her spare bedroom, allowing Luna free access to both spaces. One morning, Jack arrived to find Margaret in an unexpected state of excitement. "You need to see this," she said, leading him to the backyard where Duke was resting in a patch of sunshine. "There's a neighborhood stray that's been visiting a scrappy little orange thing. Watch what happened when it approached the fence." As if on cue, a thin orange cat appeared atop the fence. Eyeing Duke warily, Luna, who had been resting beside the German shepherd, immediately rose and positioned herself protectively in front of him. Her posture was pure canine, legs stiff, tail straight, a low growl emanating from her throat. "She's protecting him," Jack realized aloud. "From another cat," Margaret added significantly. "She's chosen sides. Jack, she knows exactly who she is and where she belongs." The incident, witnessed by several neighbors and eventually captured on Emily's camera, became the final piece in a growing narrative that was changing hearts and minds throughout Pinewood. Luna wasn't just a curiosity anymore. She had become a symbol of adaptation, loyalty, and the wisdom of choosing one's own path regardless of expectations. Jack Thompson stood on the front porch of a modest white farmhouse at the edge of Pinewood, breathing in the crisp autumn air. 6 months had passed since the flood that had nearly separated his unusual family. Now, as golden leaves drifted down from the maples lining the long gravel driveway, he felt a profound sense of gratitude for the strange and winding path that had brought them all here. "Another beautiful day," he remarked to Duke, who sat attentively beside him. The German shepherd's muzzle had grown slightly grayer over the past year, but his eyes remained alert and watchful. From inside the house came the sound of Emily's laughter, followed by the distinctive half-meow, half-bark that everyone in Pinewood now recognized as Luna's unique vocalization. The story of how they had secured this perfect home still amazed Jack when he thought about it. After the Riverville Gazette article, a retired couple from the neighboring county had reached out. They were moving to Arizona for health reasons and had been struggling to find the right caretakers for their beloved farmhouse, 5 acres, with a sturdy fence, a renovated barn, and enough space for a man and his 4-legged family to live comfortably. "We've had dogs and cats all our lives," Mrs. Henderson had explained during their first meeting. "When we read about your situation, it just felt right. This place needs life in it, needs a family that appreciates it. The terms had been more than generous, a long-term lease with rent well below market value, in exchange for Jack maintaining the property and allowing the Hendersons to visit occasionally when they returned to see relatives. It was an arrangement that seemed almost too perfect to be true. Sarah would have loved this place. Jack often thought to himself. Sometimes, in the quiet mornings when mist rose from the small pond behind the house, he could almost feel her presence, could almost hear her telling him that everything had worked out exactly as it should. Inside, the farmhouse had transformed into a home that accommodated both human and animal needs. Jack's woodworking skills, rusty from disuse after Sarah's death, had reawakened as he built ramps, perches, and climbing structures that allowed Luna to express both her feline agility and her canine desire to be part of the pack. The large, open living room gave the German shepherds plenty of space to stretch out. With Luna typically claiming her spot in the middle of the canine pile, Emily Davis had become a regular weekend visitor, continuing her observations of Luna for what had evolved from a curious child's project into a serious scientific study. Dr. Parker had connected her with a professor from the state university who specialized in animal behavior, and the young girl was now receiving mentorship that might well shape her future career. "Luna used a new vocalization today," she announced excitedly, bounding onto the porch with her ever-present notebook. "It's like she's developing her own language, part cat, part dog, but uniquely Luna. Is that so?" Jack smiled at her enthusiasm. And what was she trying to say? "I think she was telling Bella to wait her turn for treats," Emily replied. She made this sound somewhere between a warning growl and a cat's chirp, and Bella immediately backed up and let Luna go first. Jack nodded thoughtfully. "They've always had their own way of communicating. Sarah used to say animals understand more than we give them credit for. My research professor says Luna might be one of the most documented cases of cross-species behavioral adaptation," Emily continued proudly. "He thinks we might be able to publish a paper in a junior science journal next year." From the less likely corners had come additional support for Jack's unusual family. Margaret Wilson, once their most vocal critic, had become their most steadfast defender. After witnessing Duke and Luna's profound bond firsthand, she had undergone what she called a reconsideration of natural order, and now spoke forcefully against anyone who questioned the arrangement. "Nature is full of exceptions," she had declared at the most recent town council meeting when the subject of pet regulations arose. "Who are we to say what is normal for an animal when we can plainly see they're thriving?" Her transformation had extended beyond words to actions. Twice weekly, Margaret now brought her women's church group to Jack's farm, where they knitted and chatted while watching what they called the Luna Show. The gray tabbies' earnest attempts to participate in whatever the German shepherds were doing, from fetch games to obedience training. Most remarkably, Margaret had begun fostering rescue cats, socializing them for adoption with the help of Duke, whose gentle patience seemed to calm even the most traumatized felines. Luna served as an unusual ambassador between species, demonstrating to frightened cats that dogs need not be feared, though none of the foster cats ever attempted to imitate her dog-like behaviors. "Some things can't be taught," Dr. Parker had observed during one of his regular visits to check on the animals. Luna's adaptation happened during a critical developmental window. "She's one of a kind." One of a kind indeed, Jack thought as he watched Luna emerge onto the porch. Flanked by Max and Bella, the tabby had grown into a magnificent cat with unusually strong muscles from keeping up with her larger siblings. Her gray striped coat gleamed with health, and her movements flowed with a grace that somehow combined feline precision with canine purpose. Luna surveyed her domain from the porch steps, then did something that still made Jack smile no matter how many times he witnessed it. She sat precisely like the German shepherds, her smaller body mimicking their posture perfectly, patiently waiting for their daily walk to begin. The Pinewood Animal Shelter had recently asked Jack to bring Luna and the dogs in once a month to help socialize difficult-to-place animals. Luna, in particular, had shown a remarkable ability to calm anxious dogs and reassure skeptical cats, as though she spoke both languages and could translate between worlds. "We ready for our walk?" Jack asked, reaching for the leashes that hung by the front door. All four animals immediately assumed their positions in their practiced routine. Duke at the lead, Max and Bella flanking him, and Luna taking her place in the formation with the dignity of a soldier joining her platoon. As they set off down the long driveway, a car pulled up, and Margaret emerged with a fresh apple pie and a newspaper tucked under her arm. "Have you seen the latest?" she called, waving the paper. "Your Luna's become something of a celebrity." The article she showed him featured a photo of Luna at the animal shelter, sitting attentively beside a traumatized rescue dog that had previously refused to interact with humans or other animals. The headline read, "Therapy Cat Who Thinks She's a Dog Helps Heal Broken Hearts at Local Shelter." Jack smiled as he read the piece, which described how Luna's unique perspective as a bilingual animal, fluent in both dog and cat, made her exceptionally effective at bridging gaps between frightened animals and potential adopters. "She's teaching us all something, isn't she?" Margaret remarked, watching as Luna trotted confidently alongside the German shepherds. "About finding your own way in the world, even when it doesn't match what others expect of you." "I think Sarah knew that all along," Jack replied softly. "It's why she wanted to add a cat to our family in the first place. She always said different perspectives make us stronger." As the afternoon sun gilded the autumn landscape, Jack walked with his remarkable family along paths that had become familiar and dear. Luna occasionally raced ahead with bursts of feline speed, then circled back to resume her position in the canine formation, never fully leaving either world behind, but creating something new and wonderful in the space between them. Her journey from half-drowned kitten to confident, unique individual who had touched so many lives reminded Jack daily that family came in all forms. The boundaries between species, like the rigid categories humans so often clung to, were perhaps more fluid than anyone had imagined. And in that fluidity, in that willingness to adapt and connect, lay a kind of wisdom worth honoring. "Good girl, Luna," Jack murmured as she looked up at him with clear, intelligent eyes. "You found your way home, just like the rest of us, in the quiet corners of our hearts. We all know what it means to feel displaced, to wonder where we belong in a world that seems to have rigid expectations for who we should be. Luna's story speaks to something profound in the human experience, especially as we enter life's autumn years, like this remarkable cat who found her identity between worlds. Many of us have discovered that our true selves don't always fit neatly into society's boxes. We understand what it means to lose a beloved partner, as Jack lost Sarah, and to find healing in unexpected places. We know the pain of having to leave homes filled with memories, and the uncertainty of building something new, but Luna's journey reminds us that family isn't defined by convention. It's created through love, loyalty, and the courage to be authentically ourselves. In our golden years, as we face transitions and losses, perhaps our greatest wisdom is recognizing that adaptation isn't surrender but strength. The bonds we forge across differences, across generations, across perspectives, across the artificial boundaries we create, these connections sustain us through life's storms. Like Luna, we can embrace who we truly are, even when it defies expectation, and in doing so, find our way home to ourselves. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.